Hey there kids, just as a reminder, I'm a narrator on Chilling, the awesome horror app that features over 1,000 horror stories, over a dozen narrators, some of whom you may already know from YouTube, as well as full-length novels, exclusive series, and Chilling originals. You can select and change the ambient sound in the background of stories whenever you want without affecting the story you're listening to, and we release hours and hours of new stories every week. Click the link in the description down below to start your free trial and see if you like it. Also, Chilling's always doing fantastic giveaways, and if you check over at thechillingapp.com and you've already started your free trial, all you have to do is leave an honest review and enter to win one of the giveaways on their website. Chilling 2.0 is also on its way, which I don't want to spoil any surprises, but it's well worth your time if you've already signed up. That's it for now. If you guys want to check out more of Chilling, please go to the description down below, head over to thechillingapp.com, or you can just find Chilling on the App Store on either iPhone or Android. And now, on to tonight's story. Please heed my warning. This universe is already on a fast track to expiring, and you people are the only ones in the universe left alive at this point. I'll tell you my story and travels in hopes they'll help your people survive. My name is Orin. I've come from a different dimension, a different universe, trying to rescue and save as much life as I can from what I call the Void. In science, you people call it vacuum decay. Except this is a real, living creature. It swallows entire star systems and galaxies. Right now, when you look into the sky and you see countless stars, they are but remnants of life, and their final breath is traveling through space to express their last dying words. There's nothing out there for you. Nothing can stop it, and there is nothing to see anymore. It will take millions of years before it gets to you, but I can let you know it's all dead out there. I'll tell you my own story so you can follow in my footsteps, as it could lead to the survival of your race and future generations. But you must act very soon. Let me begin where it all began in my home universe. A very long time ago, my people were an incredibly advanced race, where we were on the precipice of dimensional travel. My people have always had a very long lifespan to give some perspective to the entire human civilization, until this point would only be a blink in my total lifetime. Because of this, there's a wealth of knowledge that's been passed down from generation to generation. It's all being accumulated to this point. With all this knowledge, several thousand years before the Great Dying, we discovered the Void collapsing entire galaxies. Our greatest minds got together in what's called the Council, and brainstormed a possible end to the Void. However, no matter what we threw at it, no matter the attempts to reach out, the creature seemed unwavering and had the intent to end everything. The council decided there was no way to stop the great devouring Void, so they wanted to move on to another dimension. However, the machine wasn't done. At this point, we had very little time left, as the Void was moving closer and closer by the year. Soon after, there was the discovery of a new mineral. This mineral had all the answers that we needed, and produced enough radioactive power to charge the temporal machine. However, it was close to the Void, so we extracted as much as we could before it could end up in the beast's gullet. The events after would lead to my eventual travel to 7 other dimensions, all containing the beast, all ending the same, swallowed up into nothing. Within a few years, the council was able to get a working model, and testing was on the way. I was part of the council at this point, since I was the head engineer. I would facilitate the trials. The first one was a young woman who couldn't be older than 6,000 years. She was short, but perfect for the first test. She could put the suit on, and within seconds, her suit started to light up. Good, it's working, great. We may only need one test for her size range, I thought to myself. Shortly after, the whirring of the metal and popping became extraordinarily loud. Shortly after, I started hearing the crunching of bone and the tearing of flesh. Her screams echoed throughout the testing chamber. Her blood was leaking out of the suit, and a mist of blood sprayed as the pressure grew on the suit. Before I could turn the suit off, it already collapsed, her whole body into a round mass of meat and blood. This was not the last trial this happened. Time and time again, no matter the size or the tweaks I designed, they all failed, each test subject ending up as a puddle on the floor. The public grew wary, and fewer people volunteered. We ended up having to pay them to have people test it. After a year of failures, the void was within a couple of 100 years, which to us was not long enough. We kept trying. Hundreds of bodies piled up, and within a few years left, I was finally successful in my first test. I started with a stout man who was 7 foot 2 inches tall, 265 pounds. That being said, he was a bit nervous, knowing the pile of bodies that he was trying to overcome. We were all scared of what could happen. I was on the floor this time, and tweaking the suit to only jump to the nearest safe dimension. I found there was an issue, and the suit was low on fuel, but we decided to go forward with it anyways. You'll be okay, I promise. I'll be here to watch personally to make sure that it all goes right, I said to the test subject. He looked at me with a nervous smile and shook his head in silence, accepting his fate whether he lives or dies. In a wave of my hand, the other scientists in the pod above pressed the button and activated. In a flash of bright blue light, the man disappeared. I did tell him how to come back, and the idea is the suit needs to wait 2 hours before it can actually boot up and start again. I left instructions on how to start it manually in the pocket. We hear him say something over comms, but it was full of static. I could still make it out.
I see blue. Clouds are
I replied to him with how to fix the issue that you can hear him slowly getting better.
Hello, is this better?
He said. Yes, much better. Go ahead. Describe the area. There was a short pause.
Sky's blue. The clouds are normally akin to our clouds. Oddly, I don't see any other beings or life. I don't see grass or trees. Just all dirt and stone.
I wrote down some other information. It was only relevant to see if we could live there, so we might be able to plant trees or vegetables. While I was writing the notes down, I hear,
What the fuck is that?
It was the test subject. He was screaming and running for his life. Listen, you have to describe what's going on. What's chasing you? I could hear him huffing and puffing.
I don't think it could have caught up. It's slow.
I wrote this down and asked, What are its features? The test subject was able to catch his breath and say,
Okay. Thing's bright orange. Had 4 legs, with what looked to be stone covering him from head to toe. Just walking around. There's no head. I can see just legs and a body. Can I come back?
I note all this on the pad. All right, you can come back. Just pull the cord on your chest. Press the button inside the glove. He sighs and replies, Okay, here goes nothing. I can hear the suit whir up and pop. Seconds later, I hear screaming coming from the admin room. I rush upstairs and find the male subject unable to speak. He was out of the suit, and the suit itself was on the ground. However, he was melded into the wall. No blood was coming out. It looked as if he'd fused with it perfectly. It wasn't until he started to flail his arms and grab people that were studying him and his effects. An hour goes by and I reported it worked only one way. But the good news was it worked. I reported these findings to the rest of the people, and with only a few days left, we all started to mass produce the suits. The only kicker is we only had fuel for 1 suit. which I knew, but the rest didn't. I'm not proud of this, but the void was getting closer. At the point where I fueled up the suit all the way, there was only hours left. Everyone was getting ready to start their suits. Billions of my people, all hopeful but unaware of the void that was going to end their suffering. I only hope my people got a swift death, as I teleported out. I think about all my people being destroyed by the void. I wake up at night screaming and remember seeing it open its impossibly huge mouth as it swallowed the stars and galaxy barreling towards us. Can't imagine the fear they had when none of the suits worked, or the anger they had when they noticed I left and no one else. What was I supposed to do? Die? Not warn countless others? My decision wasn't a selfish one. I built the suit. I know all of its ins and outs. I know how to fuel and take care of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to rant, but I need you to read this to understand how this thing worked. My home dimension has been gone by now, I thought, as I popped into a new dimension. This one was strange. Everything was gray, but I could feel the wind. I looked at my diagnostics. It all appears there was a breathable amount of oxygen in the air. This planet was entirely the same as ours, just underdeveloped. It was getting late. I needed to build a shelter. Now, with the rest of the night, I just used the fuel that I had left to charge my suit. That was the backstory of my universe. This new one will be gone soon, but that's a story for a different time. As this one has gone long enough, I have way more to tell about the new plane. Tonight I'll be charging the suit up and laying down. Until then, live long, travelers. Signed, Oren D. Hello, Oren again. I've been getting accustomed to the way of life here. My home planet and this one are strikingly similar. Language, height, structure, mathematics. It's mind-blowing to say the least. Recently, I found the material I used to power my suit. Potassium-40, which I can see is easily found in this world, so I won't have to worry about getting out in time, since the dimension sure is amazing, to say the least. Anyhow, I'm going to tell you about the first dimension I traveled to. There I was, alone in a barren world. Oddly enough, there were a few differences I later found. Walking around the wasteland, I found little signs of life. It seemed all the color had been removed from the place, other than the color I had on me and the fire I built earlier. The crackling of the fire was comforting, as it was incredibly quiet on this plane. I sent out a small survey drone to scan the whole planet for life. And other than the plants, there was none. Has this place ever been colonized? I thought to myself. Suddenly, the drone came back and noted that it did find evidence of civilization not far from where I was camped, so I decided to rest for the night and head out in the morning. I woke up, and the only thing I can hear is the gentle song of the wind rustling the dead leaves. The sun wasn't high in the sky when I woke, so it must still be morning. I packed all the firewood that I could carry in my bag, headed north towards the city. As I walked the derelict roads and empty fields, I can't help but feel alone in my thoughts and feelings. I thought to myself, is this my life now? Stuck to be alone until I die. And normally I'm okay with being alone most of the time. Shit, I never dated more than a few times and lived alone for thousands of years. However, this feeling was different. I didn't ever feel truly alone. And here, here I feel like this. It took my entire people being gone and me being chucked into a new dimension to finally feel this hopelessness and complete emptiness. So quiet that my ears are ringing and I can hear my own heart louder than my thoughts. I saw this large hill and I began to climb it. I distinctly remember the hill was soft and malleable like clay. Had a distinct smell about like ammonia. Every step made it worse to smell and was harder to bear. I flipped my suit's helmet on to escape the overwhelming smell. I was still a little lightheaded, but this was a powerful lesson to learn further on in the day. As I got to the crest of this hill, I could see the city. It's rather large. Looks like nature overcame the bustling city sprawl. To describe the layout, it was a lot of towers. Many reached several hundred feet, but in the middle of the city was a really large tower that dwarfed the rest. Many of the buildings were collapsing, and I see multiple vehicles of all sorts of shapes and sizes. All of them were in surprisingly good condition, but you can tell they weren't being used. After about a half a day of walking down the hill across a long road, I finally got to the city. Up close, it was even larger than I estimated. Concrete towers that penetrated the heavens. On closer inspection, these towers were made of silver and stainless steel. They had no rust, but were covered with vines and moss. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. It felt surreal being the only one here. Where was everyone? Why was everyone gone? Why is there no life anywhere? No bodies are either, just a husk of a city. A city made by gods, but abandoned by man. I started to investigate all of this, it just didn't sit right with me. Even food that was left out wasn't molded due to all life being dead, even bacteria. Everything was left in such pristine condition as well. I went to what seemed like the town center, which was a massive building in the middle of the city. As I got closer, I can see there was a civil discourse, maybe some sort of rebellion, as bodies littered the ground in front of the building, all covered with a light sheen of yellow, slimy residue that had the same ammonia smell as the hill I walked on earlier. On some of the bodies, these people were wearing signs, seemingly warning of the end times, and the great dying was approaching. There was a larger number of flyers, newspapers around, each made of a strange plastic material, but more coarse in texture. The flyers and newspaper all relayed the same information. The world's religion was named Sarxism, and how they were using ritual sacrifices to try and appease the Elder God, the bringer of the end times, the Void. This dimension has him too, but was he here? What is this thing? Why was it able to exist across 2 dimensions? It looks like it was dated to be a week from now to get here. I had little time. I immediately felt dread. I jumped to a new dimension just to suffer the same fate. I must leave this place and have enough fuel to, but I must know why these people who revered this thing as a god. I looked all over the city until I found it. The Church of the Devourer. This has to be it, I said to myself. Approaching the door, it was made of wood, and the building seemed to be entirely concrete, which was weird, based on the architecture of the entire city being way more modern, advanced. Ignoring this, I pushed the door open. Well, I tried. It was stuck on what looked to be a mass of bodies all covered in the same slime as earlier. I walked around and found a broken-out window and climbed through. As I stumbled through rather clumsily, I see it in full display. Bodies hung from the rafters, stripped of their flesh, exsanguinated, eviscerated. The people by the door were all stripped naked, and on closer inspection they were all stitched together like some visceral meat pile. I was sick to my stomach and puked on the floor, nearly passing out. I turned away and got my composure. Why were they doing this? Was this thing a god they didn't please? I looked to the main stage, the pews, and found the religious texts. All things that live belong to the great devourer. We sacrifice our loved ones to him so they may in turn be a part of him, saving them from eternal suffering in the elder god's gullet. Oceans of acid and air, of fire, are all that exists. But if we give our bodies, minds, and souls to the great devourer, we will be spared eternal pain. As I looked more, I see writing saying how the government was vilifying these religious zealots and outlawing their religion. I read the head priest's notes on his speech of that day. We'll burn the city to the ground. We'll run all the politicians and offer them up as sacrifices for him. He demands we take over and lead this city to ruin as it committed the greatest sin. Denial of his love. These whack jobs legitimately thought this was the best way to go. I put the notes in my pocket to see that these people had no answers of them. Just knew that he was coming, and they couldn't stop it. I looked further at the pew and noticed a small button. I pressed it and the wall behind me began to split open, revealing a secret room. I used my drone to scan for possible life signs in the room first, and nothing came back. As I got to the room, I felt shivers run up my spine. Every fiber of my being was telling me nothing good will come of this. I rejected the feeling and shook my head. I, a man of facts and science. I opened the door slowly. What I saw was terrifying. A large mural of the great devourer, made entirely of human body parts, painted with blood. Under the mural was a bed with what I assume was the pastor, dead. I found his journal. We were blessed today. Outside the town on the hill, the smell of death, we found our greatest weapon. A poison so strong, if we ventilated throughout the city, everyone would be able to be saved and embrace his love. Tonight my scribes have gotten plenty of the substance we need. Tomorrow we storm the capital and take all the leaders, bring them back here. I'll make a mural of their flesh. I'll destroy their bodies as the ultimate sacrifice for the elder god. All of them will pay for not following. Women, men, and children. It matters not. All that matters is his love. After doing further research, I found this group killed them all with mustard gas. I wanted to find out more, so I looked around hoping to find any semblance of hope. A way to beat this thing. I looked through the nightstands, the dressers. I was checking the bed when next to it was a loose, flimsy floorboard. It was odd. I decided to pull it up. Inside the small hole in the floor was a book, explaining in detail all they knew of the beast. Turns out the priest didn't believe his teachings, and he was terrified. The praying seemed to make it stronger and faster, and an excerpt of the page goes as follows. It's been a full year, and I've yet to hear anything coming from it. I keep hearing its groaning through the cosmos. Into my brain with each passing day, it seems to get stronger. What if this thing isn't the Messiah that we're wanting? I can feel it deep down. We're not being saved, we're being judged, and judgment is soon. Hopefully this nightmare ends before it arrives. That was the last note. Seems they have no idea what it is, but looks like religion makes it grow stronger. I found the fuel I needed in the lifeless dimension, and started the suit up. I kept telling you about the suit. It seems mystical. It could do anything, which is partially true. The suit itself is an anagram for sentient unity and integration technology. It is sentient, as the name says, and helps with vitals, reconnaissance, safety. All is integrated into a light material that translates the local language and is immune to kinetic-based damage. Roughly how Earth's Kevlar works, but it can think on its own and stop firepower by an order of magnitude more. It's a great tool for survival, and it's the only reason I am alive today. And yes, it does come with built-in waste disposal. Now that you know what it can do, we can move on. During my time on the lifeless planet I was on, I searched the city and found where the king of the city would be. A large building covered in dead moss and vines. The building itself seemed to be made of marble, with a large wooden door that has seemed badly broken open. I stepped through the small hole that was made and saw a derelict fountain and bodies all around it. The fountain was filled with blood, and the air had a smell of rusty metal and stagnant water. These bodies were completely exsanguinated. They had tubes that ran from a small incision in their neck, roughly where the carotid artery would be, into the fountain. This must have been one of the sacrifices. I felt a general unease because as I looked more into this incident, the more evidence I found of ritualistic sacrifice. They're not only drained, but I could smell the ammonia on them. They were pumped full of chemicals to replace their blood. I couldn't be around them anymore, so I left to climb the golden-plated stairs and walk to the hallway of the king's quarters. His sight was horrific. In the hallway, I found more instances of sacrifice. What seemed to be armed guards were strung up by their Achilles tendon. They were dressed much like an animal. They had been completely degloved. No blood stained the floor, leading me to believe they were killed at another location. If this is what happened to just the guard, I can't imagine what happened to the king. I walked around the corner of the hall before opening the door to the king's quarters. I had to compose myself. This is the worst possible situation they could be in, and the worst for me. However, my thirst for knowledge and revenge drives me forward as I open the door. When the door swung open, the instant smell of sweet flowers, much like the honeysuckles you have on this planet. It was the momentary reprieve from all death and dismemberment that I had been seeing. It was nice. Here there were no dead bodies, no sign of destruction either. It was immaculately clean, which made my anxiety rise slowly. Ooh, was someone still alive here? Couldn't be, since the entire population had been dead for quite some time. The room was beautiful. It was full of colored lights and drapes. The bed was gigantic. Must have been at least 15 feet by 15. I sat on the bed and was soft. It was comfortable. Softest bed I'd ever felt. I was already getting tired. I decided to lock the bedroom door and lay down. The suit told me there was still no life or movement detected, so I laid down with ease. Felt as if I was sleeping on a pillow made of clouds. I woke up in a state of shock as my suit's alarms were blaring, telling me that I'm in danger. I need to teleport out of here now. Now again, this is serious. The void is above. I looked up and saw the ceiling of the building being ripped open, and before I could teleport, I felt my body being lifted into the black abyss. I could hear the cries and wails of all people that it had swallowed, the pain of each of their stories all overlapping to reach me in my headspace. I could see the great empty by the hungering maw of the great destroyer, a never-ending void that seemed to suck the concept of hope right out of me. I felt helpless. Like I was infinitesimal compared to this thing. I felt overwhelming despair and fear as I flew into its gullet. And just as soon as I was in, it was just me floating in nothingness. As far as I could see, it was all black. I tried to shine my light, but even light was swallowed by the immense darkness the void is. As I floated in the big space, I heard it talk to me. Welcome to the end. This is where all things die. Life love, happiness. All are constructs of the mind, and all get swallowed by me. I thought to myself, how am I not dead? Why is my life spared? It shook a lot, sounded like a deep chuckle. The voice once again spoke. I chose to keep you alive. You will be my herald, the harbinger. There is no stopping me. There is no running away. I supersede everything. All concepts and creation are nothing but a page in a book to me. Listen carefully. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Nothing is above me or below me, as I am all things. I started to get dizzy and shouted at the beast, I will stop this! I will stop you! It was then I woke up from a deep sleep. Cold sweat dripping from my brow. I felt out of breath. The suit was telling me your heart rate was nearly 200 BPM. Are you okay? I thought for a second and looked around and thought how real it all felt. I can't believe what I went through. Was this all a dream or a revelation? No, it must be a dream, I thought to myself. I am a man of science, and there's no God, no kings, only men. I stood up off the bed and walked towards a quite large bookshelf. I don't know what I was searching for, but it seemed I'd found the right book. It's called Revelations. And as I pulled the book, a mechanism started to turn it around. I stepped back quickly, as I was rather startled. Like a bookcase secret door. It's rather cliche, but I never expected it, so I'm assuming it did its job. Suit. Analysis. The suit whirled for a second and said, one life form detected. Non-hostile. Medical diagnosis shows coma. Strange. The one surviving thing in this whole planet is this thing in a coma. I used my built-in light to illuminate the dark room. In the back of a metallic pod was a person. The person was rather old. It looked to be kept on an artificial life source. Next to the pod was a message on a computer. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my work, ye mighty, in despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Something to learn about this dimension travel is many literary phrases. They're common ground. It makes no sense he should know this, but I digress. In a note underneath the poem was him saying, I caused the great collapse, the rise and the fall of the government, and the rise of the religious zealots. It was all foretold in my nightmares. Death awaits us all, but I feel I deserve something worse than death. I deserve to suffer in my mindscape for all eternity. I am the last surviving ley line on this planet, and I will suffer for my transgressions. Void. Take me. Its name was directly mentioned here. I was startled, to say the least. My empath was kicking in as I felt rage for all the lost souls, all those deaths perpetrated by this man. All the agony and fear of the entire race were screaming to kill him. But no, it was too good for him to die now. He wanted to suffer, so let him. With my knowledge of this world, I decided to leave. The rest was all I've read and heard before. The new dimension awaits. I look into the sky towards the void one last time and raise my hand and say, fuck you, as the suit transported me to another reality. This one was filled with life. The air was clean. But this is a story for another time. I appreciate all the kind words. It's not easy integrating into a functional society as large as this one. I will have part 3 out soon. The suit and I will be making sure that those stalking men stay away. Be safe out there. Signed, Oren Date. What is God? Within our reality, I never believed such a being existed. I've seen beings that we would consider gods, ones that hold unfathomable power, who can wipe us out with a thought. Their reach and scope of our understandings are within the bound of our reality. So, what would constitute what God is? A being that would transcend this reality. Look upon us not as if we were atoms, but as if we were thoughts, ideas. Totally and completely separate from our reality. We'd be nothing but words to it. Much like Superman could never physically interact with you or me. We would never be able to interact with it. But what makes the laws of that being? The one who transcends us, who writes the rules of that being? Is there one that transcends the being that transcends us? Where does this hierarchy of stories originate, then? I've often thought of this. Perhaps there's a being out there we would never be able to understand, the one who transcends us and in very nature who transcends itself. With my studies, I've found there's an infinite set of infinite sets of realities. This is all contained within our one singular dimensional plane. Upon further tests, I've found a transfinite amount of universes in one singular multiverse. So where do we stand with this creature? How many universes have I gone up just to find this thing erasing it all again? The fear of something not even I can reach begins to make me think all my effort is futile. Now, with this being said, the most I can do is try. I may never be able to stop it or prevent its damage, but I can save as many as possible. Am I asking all of this? Last night I've done studies and tests, each coming back with an answer. Each test adds more information to our cosmology. This universe is just a rung on a ladder to what seems to be another transfinite recursion of universes, ever expanding, going up and down in a stack. Each universe sees the one below as words on a page. Could I be akin to a god for the ones I transcended using the suit? But to you, I seem to be a normal human. What will happen when I eventually move in from this universe upwards? It is all in the unknown even for someone like me. Is the void an end-all be-all God? I fear this is the case. I can't find a single universe below our own to be left intact. It's all being erased. An empty, endless void is all there is. Maybe for the one reading this, I'm only words to you. Maybe the one who wrote my story is but a fictional character in the unending layers of narratives. A hierarchy of stories, if you will. All this seems rather unlikely as I have conversation with the people in this site. Sorry, I ramble on when I make a discovery. This series is all about possibilities of survival. I found all of this with a possibility matrix designed by my people. It's unsettling to think what I thought was real and tangible is nothing but words now. The more I think of this, the more I dread and I think of what's to come. Will I ever be able to reach and stop the void before all stories become erased? I can only try. The reason I bring this up is that the more I study, the more time and effort I put into finding out how to stop the void, the more I become stuck in a depressive state. The feeling of absolute hopelessness washing over me. Even if I was able to rise upwards through this stack, I'd never be able to reach the top. Have you ever felt true hopelessness? It's scarier than any monster, human or alien. True nihilism is depressing beyond belief. I wake up and I run tests until I eventually pass out. When I wake the next day, the cycle continues, day in, day out. I would ask for assistance, but this is my burden. I feel that since I first moved up the stack, I started a never-ending chain of destruction in my wake. All possible possibilities and even impossible events could have happened due to my pure selfishness. Life is a dark and fleeting place, with existence as a whole and entirely reliant on your efforts and interest. Maybe you, reader, will not believe me, or maybe you'll see what I mean. To put it in perspective, even when a person is holding a gun at your head, even when you're being chased by a large creature who will kill you if they catch you, there is still a sliver of hope. Possible realities where you can be the victor. In this situation, there was no hope, no possibilities, only the void. Hope is one fuel that keeps us going, and I'm running out of fumes at this point. With all the knowledge my people had, it wasn't enough. Even discovering how our universe system is run by possibilities and abstract mathematics, much like a tag-mark Type 4 universal theory, I still am unable to see what I can do to solve this problem. Last night I had a dream in which I was drifting in a sea of black ink. In every direction I looked, it was empty. When I looked into the sea, it felt like it was staring back through my reflection. In this dream, the sun was up and bright, painfully bright. I could feel my skin burning and bubbling under the rays. Felt as if I was being punished by God. I could smell the scent of my flesh being cooked as the heat cranked up. I tried yelling in pain, but no sound came out. The only noise I could hear was my skin being turned into what you people call pork rinds. If I wriggled and writhed in pain, I could hear its voice. Your story is strange. I can feel you trying to escape a predestined narrative. You are to bring others to me, much like the feeble human reading this post. The void bellowed out to me. And suddenly I could see a large jet-black figure rise from the sea, covered in ink. The figure walked across the sea of ink and stopped in front of me, making an eye connection, although its face was featureless. When we locked eyes, the sun started to set and my wounds began to rapidly heal. A wave of calm washed over me as his appearance slowly revealed. The creature was a large, pale, no-eyed monster with only a thin set of lips, an unnaturally giant maw that smiled at me with a sharp, toothy grin. It breathed deep and spoke again, but this time in a calm, more gentle tone. Relax. I have no ill will toward you. Listen carefully, as I will only say this one time. I need you to bring in readers. I must feed on their stories. I looked at him confused. What do you mean by reader? He looked into the sky, and I could feel him peering into my soul. It's them I want. I want you. I can feel your heart racing, your eyes following the screen from left to right. Soon I will be with you all. Soon. I looked puzzled. Who are you talking to? It cocked its head toward me. You know nothing of this current situation. You are but a pawn, but even pawns are useful. I can't feel any malice coming from this entity, but I still have a very uneasy feeling as if one wrong move and he could eat me. You may leave my void now, child. I have what I want. He took a deep breath with ecstasy, and it is delicious. The monster licked his lips shortly after he raised his hand and flicked it upwards. All of a sudden, I was being flung into the air as if something was pulling me at an alarming rate. Within seconds, I couldn't even see the earth. After flying for about 1 minute, I heard a crash, and all seemed to slow down. The universe I was in shattered like broken glass, and when I reached the other side, I woke up. I was shivering and covered in a cold sweat. Panicking, I looked at my arm and I felt terrible pain. My whole right arm was bruised. I feel a searing heat throughout the sun-scorched body, but it was all a dream. I don't know what reality is or fiction. I feel like I'm going insane. I need rest. My head is spinning, my ears are ringing. My next chapter will be about the universe I traveled to. Until next time, be careful out there. Signed, Oren. Hello everyone, Oren again. I've been running from some rather strange-looking men and women wearing all-black suits. I keep seeing them out of the corner of my eye when I would walk to a store to get food. Strangely enough, they seem to stay out of sight, where I could see them, but as soon as I try to focus on them, they disappear. I don't like being followed in all my adventures I've had. Something following me never came out to be good. While I am safe, I have another place to tell you about. This one was directly after meeting with Alex. After a quick flash of light, I was transported to a new dimension. Oddly enough, while I was traveling, I was able to see the space in between dimensions. It looked to be a blank, empty page, a white canvas ripe for painting. In the distance, I could see scribbles appearing on the page like words were being written. I couldn't make it out as it was so far, but as soon as I was able to read the first line, I was flashed into a new universe. The song of birds was filling the air. The gentle call of the wind and the trees rustling their leaves, dancing to the music of the wind. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever been. Serenity was the definition of this place. It was as if this place was the concept of peace. Just a moment of bliss in my otherwise hopeless future. The smell of sweet flowers and the songs of birds filled the air. I was in a daze of bliss when a woman walked up to me. Naturally, I was very defensive and stood up in shock. Whoa, easy there. I just thought I saw lightning strike my field here, but it was just you. Are you okay, stranger? The mysterious woman approached me with a smile, soft expression. I looked in confusion as she was dressed head to toe in leaves and vines. Yes, I'm fine. Where am I? The mysterious woman answered. Let's start with the name. My name is Tikva. What's yours, stranger? I looked puzzled. Not every day I see someone in such immaculate beauty and poise. I'm sorry, my name is Oren. She looked at me and smiled before she said, Well, Oren, nice to meet you. Why are you here? Do you need help? I smiled back awkwardly. I never knew someone can pull at my heart with just a smile. I felt like an ice cube, and she was the sun, warming me and making me melt at the same time. Yes, I need to talk to you and whomever else I can. She waved at me and pointed at what was her home. Well, let's sit down and talk. I would like to know why you are wearing such a strange getup. I was a little confused about her dialect and slang, but the suit was able to explain it to me. I built this suit. It's made of a very advanced technology I can't explain in detail right now. She scratched her head. Tech what? Never mind. Let's get inside and warm up with some tea. We can talk then. We looked at each other and she held her hand out, so I grabbed it, assuming that's what she wanted, but we walked hand in hand together. Was this what love felt like? Did I meet someone who I'm compatible with? We got to the house. As I walked in, the front of the home was made of all wood. It looked like it was one large tree that was shaped into a home. The more I looked, the more I was certain. The wood was all one piece and wasn't a single carving mark at all, down to the table and the chairs. How is this made? She looked at me, puzzled again. I learned to love that face. Such innocence and wonder. What do you mean? The world tree provides us a home, silly. You know that. I looked back into her green eyes. They looked like I was staring into a forest during dusk or dawn, as if the light was shining through the bright green leaves. What you staring at, Oren? You okay? She responded. I shook my head to snap out of my trance. I was swooning into this woman. For the first time in my life, I felt hope. I was lost in your eyes. My apologies. I need to speak about an issue, but I need to run some tests. Wait. Your home is from a tree. So this is one tree. She laughed and blushed a little. Well, Oren, you sound new. Somehow you don't know what the world tree is? You're just on a branch high in the sky. Here, I'll show you. She gestured for me to a window. I could feel the gentle breeze. As she pointed to the outside, she said, Look, that is the world tree. I rubbed my eyes. I've never seen anything as beautiful. A giant tree stretched hundreds of miles up. We were so high the clouds were covering the ground and the roots looked like small sticks. I saw thousands of settlements scattered across the branches, large cities and homes. People were walking about in the distance around the town hall. I closed my jaw as Tikva said, You ain't from around here, huh? Where are you from, Oren? I snapped out of my trance. Yes, that. I come from a very advanced race in a different dimension. I must warn you of a possible threat to this universe. It's called, she cut me off, the Void, yes? Yeah, it was a threat long ago, but it seems to have skipped us. Gave us the greatest hope and gift. The World Tree. Without it, this planet was barren. We were all struggling to survive. The Void gave us hope. And life. I didn't know what to say. This was the first time I felt true peace. I started to cry uncontrollably. You don't understand all the pain I've been through. Lives I saw die, whole universes and dimensions completely wasted. When this was the answer. Thank you. She hugged me and I collapsed. It's okay, you're safe now. Hey, tell you what, why don't you stay here and help me around the farm? I could use a helping hand. Months passed, and we ended up falling in love. He had a great life even when I did a scan with the suit. It always came back negative. But things seemed too perfect as my now fiancée woke up one morning and was sick. She kept vomiting, having cramps. We decided to go to a shaman after a week of this. We headed to the main town, which was across the tree branches. The center of the town was immaculate. Oddly enough, this is the first time I've ever been here. The wood roads were soft and lush, full of life and creativity, down to the very flowers. The memories of this place warm my heart to this day. As we entered the hospital, it seemed like it was empty. Some doctors were there waiting for patients, I assume. Where is everyone? I whispered to Tick. Well, no one is sick here. The world tree keeps us in perfect health. There is no death or illness, only life and prosperity, Tick said to me in a cheerful tone. Interesting. I'll need to run some tests later, I thought to myself. After a few minutes of waiting, we were seen by a doctor who ran a few tests, but the manner was entirely holistic. There was no tools, no diagrams, no machines. To describe how intriguing this was, the doctor rubbed some powder on his hands and they started to glow. After he hovered his hands over her body, they started to glow different colors. He got to her stomach, and it was bright pink. The doctor proceeded to get a bowl and wash his hands off. He came back with the news. Ma'am, you are with child, and it is a girl. It was the happiest moment of my life. We jumped in joy, and something beautiful happened. The room was growing pink flowers that smelled of honeydew. I don't know what it was doing, but it felt like the tree was celebrating with us, and shortly after we went home and laid down to sleep. The night was rough. It started in my dream. I was on a boat with my wife and daughter. We were looking out into the massive expanse of the tree from below by the roots. It was majestic and beautiful. Lights filled the sky as bioluminescent lights filled the branches. It was a sudden shock when the light started to dim, and the tree looked as if it was wilting and rapidly dying. I could hear the pain screams of the people as the leaves turned black and began to fall. All those people fell to their doom. With a sickening splatter, they slammed into the base of the tree near us. The blood of those people filled the ocean, painting our boat a dark crimson. The smell of iron filled the air along with the sound of screams. It wasn't until now I noticed. A large mouth approached the tree. As it opened, the tree started to splinter and uproot itself. All the lives that were on that tree still were sucked into that massive maw of the creature. A black hole was formed in his mouth, as I could see the tree spaghettified and bending light as it entered the event horizon. The boat was slowly rising to the creature's maw as my daughter was rocketed. My wife tried catching her, but she was only able to secure her arm, and the gravitational pull was too great. Her arm was torn from her socket, and her body flew into the beast's mouth. I couldn't breathe or think. I was in a haze. The pain was too much for me. My wife jumped into my arms, and all I could feel was pain. We held each other there one last time, shared a kiss as we flew into the black hole together. Before I could touch the event horizon, time seemed to pause. I heard a voice. This is a warning. Keep moving. I need more stories. I need to feed. I was able to move when I saw the same creature earlier. Pale skin, no eyes, nose, sharp teeth, thin lips. He slowly floated towards me and smiled. It's time to wake up, Oren. And you. Don't forget, I can still hear your heartbeat. I can smell your fear. I'm coming. Just as quick as the nightmare had come on, just as quickly as it faded, I awoke screaming in terror. I was covered in a sheen of cold sweat. My body felt as if it was being torn apart from the inside out. Tick woke in worry as my pain was so massive, all I could do was rock back and forth. It took hours to subside. Tick asked what happened. Are you okay? I looked at her worried. Tick, I need to build you a suit. The void is coming. I need to show you something. Tick waved me to a secret part of the house. One I had never been to before, but it seemed to be in the branch itself. Look, love. This is why we don't worry about the void. She moved a curtain hiding a giant mural, one depicting the void, the exact creature I saw being slain. The person who stood over his body was... It was me. I don't know how, but it is. Tick, what does this mean? How do I kill this thing? In the background was the void tree. It filled me with hope, and then Tick responded. We must all follow our path. Yours seems to follow greatness. Defying all odds and possibilities to overcome the void. The ultimate evil, the great dying. Tick smiled at me. This smile was always comforting, filling me with hope. If I'm destined to defeat this being, how or where do I start? Is there anything on my process of doing so? Tick looked and continued to smile. No, silly. It's just a prophecy told by my people and written by the tree. The void has left us alone for a reason. It helped us thrive for a reason. With a moment of clarity, I realized this void isn't destroying this place because the place is his story. He must be tied to his narrative. There's no other reason why we would be bringing life to a place than just leave while leaving countless other dimensions in complete ruin, all to be swallowed by his massive maw. If I can somehow remove this link from this dimension, I could beat him. I could end his story. With my new theory, I set in motion a series of tests. Many years passed by with nothing conclusive. It wasn't until the few days I was there did I find something concrete to use. In my testing, I found the world tree itself contained a massive core. This core had the same general wavelength as the one the void emits when he speaks to me. This is it. The link between the two. I found a way to end the void. The only issue is if I do this, then my daughter Kieran and Tick will either have to come with me or they'll die on the tree. I must destroy this tree. So I sat my wife down. Tick, I found a way to end the void once and for all. Her face lit up in excitement as she contained her screams. Orin, really? What is it? She said excitedly. I looked at her in her beautiful eyes. It's the tree. The soul or the origin of the void is within the tree. If I destroy the origin, I will effectively destroy the void. However, everyone on the tree will die. And I can't live without you or Kieran. I need you to come with me to a different place after we destroy the tree. We'll be safe. Her smile drained from her face, but she had a look of determination and acceptance. I'll get our daughter, and we'll meet you by the boat. I smiled, and I gave her a large hug. Then I pulled a device out of our closet. It was a spatial disruptor designed to take any wavelength and reverse the polarity, effectively destroying anything I set it to. I need to plant this in the tree where the void soul resides, and once I do, I'll get on the boat, and we'll get a safe distance away from the tree. She shook her head and stood up. We got to the base of the tree. I gave my daughter a hug and my wife a kiss. Daddy, please be careful. I smiled and waved with an act of confidence. However, I was terrified. I started drilling into the tree and got a layer into the bark when I noticed it was hollow. I shined my light into the tree, but the light seemed to be consumed by the ever-expansive darkness within. I had to go by my readings. Luckily, the suit kept the exact quadrants of the wavelength, so it was a rather easy climb. On my way down, the trunk deep in the roots, I could hear a rhythmic thumping vibrating in the tree. I was only but a mile from the spot now. It sounded like a heartbeat. As I descended downward in the dark expanse, I kept hearing its voice. Turn back now, child. You will regret this action. I just yelled into the dark. This ends today, Void! I kept ascending, roughly 100 feet from the spot. When I'm bombarded with images of horror, people's arm muscles are being ripped out by tendons, when I was seeing creatures eating someone's teeth like candy, crushing into a fine powder. I saw a man seeing his friends being bifurcated in front of him by an ungodly creature. All these images flooding my mind, sending chills down my spine, and it was when I saw it. The bleeding, beating heart of the monster. It was large, and every single beat of this thing was so massive, it sent shockwaves through the tree. I was so close to it that I could smell the disgusting stench of rotting corpses emanating from it. I'd rappelled further down where I was, hovering just above it, when I dropped the signal disruptor on its fucking heart. The void yelled and cried as I activated the device. "I'll kill you and your family, Oren! How does a mere story dare try to harm me?" Its words shook me to my core as I winced upwards as fast as possible. Reaching the exit of the tree, I could still hear it cry and curse at me. I got on the boat and my family and I sped off. Within no time at all, the tree slowly caught on fire. It was a black flame covering every possible inch of the tree. The cries and the screams of the people were horrible. Some jumped off the tree and splattered in the water nearby. The lake below became thicker as more blood and viscera poured into it. The smell of iron and burning bodies filled the air. The very community my wife helped make was crying out to her as they died. I could see her cry silently and cover her mouth as she tried her best to cope. I held her and my daughter firmly to support them. I've been through this before, but they were pure and innocent. And I don't want them to deal with or feel the pain I feel daily. After an hour of screams and the splashing of dead bodies hitting the water, he went silent. The tree was just a smoldering pile of ashes. The black fire was still silently burning in the background, and finally, it was over. The light of the sun was rising in behind the tree, birds were chirping in the air, and I felt hope. I beat him, Dick. I won. We and countless others will be safe from here on out. When I looked, Dick smiled. A large smile. It was as if hope was spilling out from her every smile. For the first time in thousands of years, I felt peace. And then time seemed to stop. All sound was deafened, the birds frozen in the air. The warmth suddenly grew into a deep cold, a cold so chilling I could feel my very soul being frozen solid. Somehow I was able to move in this frozen time. It was then I heard it. I heard it speak. Silly child. You tried to end me there, didn't you? You found my home, decided to burn it down. You destroyed my heart. I do not need mortal instruments anymore. All things will become the void. Except you. I have much larger plans for you still, but your family will only hold you back. Don't try to speak. It won't work. Now, watch as I consume them too. The void appeared in the sky above, consuming the sun, filling the whole planet with pitch blackness. I grabbed for my family and held on as tight as I could. But it separated us. Its power was too much for me still. The void opened its mouth, and I could see each layer of my family's skin being peeled off inch by inch, then muscle, then blood. They were being flayed in 0 time, and I couldn't even cry as I saw my daughter Kieran die first. She was only 6 years old. Tick was killed slower, as she was stripped, starting from the feet up. Her bones turned to ash as the void made sure her smile was the last thing that I saw before stripping it all away from me. My hope was stripped away from me. All that I loved was destroyed. Again, I couldn't even mourn before the suit decided to remove me from the dimension. In a blinding flash of light, once again, I moved up the stack. And once again, my life was made trivial, being but a story. I ask you, whatever your name is, do you believe in hope? Do you feel like life always finds a way? After that event for me, hope is dead. I need to rest. My heart hurts. I don't want to remember this anymore. I'm sorry. Until next time. Signed, Oren. I took some time off studying. It's too much for me mentally. I can still see its face, smell its breath. It's the name he told me. Why did he say the reader? Who is that? What do they have to do with this? The more I think of it, the more my head starts to ache. A strange effect. Feels like the more I think of it, the more I can feel them. The memory fogging up. Felt as if the closer I got, the further it was to move away. Anyway, I just took some Excedrin before sitting down and writing this. I can't help but shake the feeling of being watched. Like my every move and every word is being written down. Maybe it's rising through the ladder of universes that makes me more and more unstable. I've seen a ton in my travels, some more disturbing than others. The next universe I went to after the religious zealot universe. Let's call it Uni 1 and so on. It all started with a flash of light. It was a blinding flash, more so than the last teleportation I went through. It was brighter and more violent. A flashback of the first testing subject of the suit. Her body was crunched into a ball of meat and blood. I started to fear the worst and just closed my eyes. It wasn't the fear of death, more the fear of pain. The unknown of what it was like for all the countless test subjects. And just as quickly as the fear washed over me, it left, because I was in a small town seemingly in the middle of nowhere. I walked through the center of town and saw a church on a hill, a small general store. A Dollar General, of course. Even in this universe, a Dollar General is there. But anyway, as I walked through the town, I could see a couple of Olive Garden trucks. Some very ancient or primitive. I could smell the fumes coming from like burning oil and grease. I saw the covered trucks open to roughly 20 or 30 men armed with primitive rifles, exiting them carefully. They moved as a unit, and as if they were one singularity. The more I looked around, the more I noticed how odd this place felt. Everything was just a little off. I started to walk towards the closest building, a yellow building with an old tin roof. A radio transmitter was there. Maybe I could use to display an incoming message to these people. These people have to know. I walked up to the door and knocked loudly. "Hold on a minute," the stranger's voice said in the background. The door slowly opened, and I could see a man, rather stocky, about 6 feet tall. He had a can in his hand that read Coca-Cola. The man asked, "Hello, you need anything?" Behind the man was a kitchen, and it looked like he had company already. Another man sitting at the table wearing a pair of shades. Tall, thin, black hair, a black suit with white undershirt. The man looked at me with his brow raised as if he was shocked to see me. Sorry, Alex. But we can continue this conversation some other time. The command is telling me to head back to the base. Remember, you have until midnight. The man in the black gets up and walked to the door, and we moved out of his way. He looked at me as he passed, and we locked eyes. I saw him pass the glasses he wore, and his eyes were covered in cataract, yet he could see. As he was leaving, I felt a strange aura about him, as if every instinct was telling me to run. Well, anyway, stranger, my name's Alex. What you need? He asked with a bubbly personality. Well, I have urgent news for you and your people. Can I talk to you first? Alex rubbed the back of his neck. Well, sure, but first, what's your name, stranger? I smiled. I'm Oren. Nice to meet you. He waved me in and said to just sit at the table. Oren, right? You need anything to drink? Yeah, that's my name, and sure. What are you drinking earlier? Is it good? I responded. All right. I've been having memory issues lately. Also, you never had a Coke? He handed me a can, and I opened it. It was a black liquid, so it smelled like a citrus juice. I crossed my fingers and drank the first gulp, and it was amazing. I'd never had anything so sweet, crisp, bubbly in my life. The carbon in the drink was intense. It felt like my tongue was under a barrage of tiny explosions. Not even sure why my people never thought this was an idea worthy of pursuing. You seem to like it. Alex left out a hearty laugh. I put the can down and got down to it. Something is coming. It's going to eat this whole universe, and there will be nothing left. I've come from a different universe, and this thing won't be here for a few thousand years. I can help by leaving my suit plans behind and hope your people get out in time. Alex looked at me puzzled and started to run his fingers through his hair. I don't know what to say. I've been getting a weird feeling like deja vu, day in, day out. He rubs his head a little more. I can see his confusion. Suddenly, we're hearing a banging at the door. It sounded as if they were trying to break the door down. Shit, not again. Gotta go, quick, go to the studio. I didn't question as we run into the study, and he shut the large wooden doors. What's going on? I asked. Alex looked at me. I have angels who have been reaching out to me, and one of the ways is to possess other humans in town to reach me, but they become twisted amalgamations that are bloody and broke. It was then we heard banging on the studio door, but every hit made a squelching noise and spattering too. I was distracted by the door, when right outside the window we saw another walking towards. His thing was covered in black goo. It looked like one arm was missing, sputtering out blood at a high rate. Fuck! Why didn't the alarm sound? I looked at him. Alarms. Before he could explain, we hear, Stay inside and go to the nearest room without windows if you can. Close the blinds and cover your ears and eyes. This is not a drill. Do not leave for any reason. If someone is caught leaving, they will be marked as a threat. If you hear knocks at the window or door, do not answer it, even if it's family or friends, and even if they're in a dire situation. Again, this is not a drill. We will let you know when to come out. Shortly after, I was hearing trumpets. What was it, 2? No, 3. No, it was 7 trumpets sounding off. What's that noise? I tried covering my ears, but it wasn't working. Wait, you can hear it too? How? We both looked at each other in confusion, but before I could speak, the disfigured person before us was at the window, pounding on it with what used to be her hand. Chunks of viscera would stick to the glass, with each sickening splash along with a river of dark red blood. Suit, analysis on these people. Shortly after, Suit replied, They are not humans, or anything that can be considered human. They seem to have a separate form they are hiding. I also notice a special temporal loop, which resets every 24 hours. What? Did your clothes just talk to you? He looked at me puzzled. We don't have time to talk about this, Suit. How long has this been going on? This time loop that you're in? Alex started to grab his head, and then the horns sounded off louder. Suddenly, the door was splintered, and something with 9 wings and what appeared to be 4 rings circling a baby in the middle of its mass. The rings had eyes on them, and the creature spoke. It sounded like a fork scraping on rusty metal. The sound was thunderous and felt as if it was going to implode. "Activate force field!" My suit activated a bubble around me. As this thing got closer to Alex, it spoke to me. "You shouldn't be here, child. You know not the forces at work." Alex was on the floor, foaming at the mouth, but his vitals were okay. I spoke back to the winged beast. "I'm here to save as many people as I can. You don't know this, but the void..." Before I could finish, the beast rang out. "You know not of whom you speak of. Do not mention his name, as it only brings misery." At this point, I'm very confused. "How do you know of this?" Time seemed to have been frozen, as it was only the beast and me. The beast started to take a more human shape, the one I saw earlier with cataracts. "You're in a personalized hell. Alex sinned. He must suffer for what he's done. He cannot leave until he forgives himself and realizes he's stuck." "What did he do, if I can ask?" The now human-looking beast spoke. "He murdered his brother and sister-in-law, who were pregnant at the time. He then took his own life. He did this out of a fit of insanity. So Alex suffered from severe schizophrenia, so he couldn't control it. That's why, if he can forgive himself, he can move on." I looked shocked. "Oh, so this is..." The beast stopped me. "Hell. Yes. It's his hell, forced to see the loved ones die in front of him until he sees what he's done." I nodded. "I see. And who are you?" He looked at me and smiled a large smile while taking off his glasses. "I'm the fallen one, Lucifer. You can call me Lucy." I didn't follow religions, but he seemed legit. Is this what a higher being looks like? Is he an angel? I thought those didn't exist. "So Lucy, how do you know the void?" "I've been trying to help as many as I can escape its path," I asked. "It's older than God himself, being of pure nihilism. The one that's set to destroy all. All stories and history will become a mere aspect of the great beast. We cannot leave, but if you can, I say leave this universe, move on up the stack. Don't stop." I looked at him, puzzled. How did he know of the multiverse and the stack? I didn't feel like questioning it. I may stay here for a second so I can maybe help Alex. Lucy looked at me and said, "You may stay if you want. However, I can't assist you." A blinding light overtook my vision, and it looked like time started again. Alex was just waking up on the floor. "Alex, I have to tell you something. We need to sit down." He looked at me and said, "How did you survive? Are you one of the angels?" I responded, "No, but I have news for you." We both head to the kitchen and sit down. "Listen, you're stuck in an infinite loop. You're torturing yourself. For a kill," Alex cut me off by saying, "I know what I did. I deserve this. This is my punishment for killing my brother and sister-in-law." I was shocked, as he is willingly staying there, despite the obvious pain that he was in. "Alex, you didn't do it. Your other side of your brain went crazy, and you went through temporary psychosis. It wasn't your fault." Alex started to cry. "I know, damn it! The blood was on my hands when I came to. I saw my brother lying on the floor. I ripped him to pieces, chunks of his flesh. They were missing. His wife were in the kitchen too, but on the other side, her stomach ripped open. And her baby wasn't there. I ate her baby, Oren. I ate my brother. I didn't want to live with it, so I took myself out. If you were me, what would you do?" I sat in disbelief, thinking he simply just shot them. I was so wrong. I paused to gain my composure. Listen, you're just as traumatized as them, but they're in a far better place. Alex, you need to move on. It'll be okay. They will forgive you. In fact, I think they already have. Tears ran down his face, and before he could say anything, someone knocked on the door. Alex? Alex, you there? Big bro. Alex ran to the door and was greeted by his brother and his wife. Right by the couple's feet was a small child no older than 10. This must be the first time Alex saw them safe, and the daughter was fully grown. It was then he dropped to his knees and begged to be forgiven. His brother knelt down, so did his wife. They shared a long hug. Alex, we've forgiven you a long, long time ago. It's time to come home. I heard an older man yell out, Donnie! Alex! Sammy! Sorry I'm late. The family turned and all ran to their dad to give him a large hug. Alex, his wife, Sammy, stayed back to speak to me. You know, whatever you did made him realize what to do. Thank you. Alex looked back and yelled at Sammy, Come on, girl, let's go! Sammy smiled and hugged me, and then ran towards her family. The flash of white light surrounded them, and they slowly floated upwards. All of a sudden, I heard a flapping of large wings. You did good, stranger. You know we must leave, so we shall. I recommend you do the same, traveler. It was Lucy who smiled. I have to say, you made this old devil cry. Thank you again. And as soon as Lucy was here, he vanished. I started to cry tears of joy when I saw the family ascend. It was a wild ride here, but I have enough fuel to go one more time. Before I left, I could see the world being ripped away like paper in a notebook, all floating upwards. The narrative was solved. Well, I'm sorry it took a while to do this, but I hope you kind of enjoyed this one. It's very calming after seeing nothing but death and destruction. And I have a feeling Alex's story isn't over quite yet. Until next time, stay safe, travelers. Signed, Oren. How is everyone doing? For those of you who may not know, my name is Oren. I come from a different dimension, universe, and I'm here to warn you about the Void. An ever-hungering dimensional swallower. Currently, I'm on the cusp of knowing how to stop it for good before it's too late. Sorry for the long wait, my friends. I had to go on a mental break due to the last story. It just brought up scars I believe wouldn't affect me. Not only I have the mental fortitude to withstand anything, but remembering the past, it's painful, to say the least. But I digress. Last night I went through my memory banks to see what I could have missed, and I found a dimension I've been to that you could help with removing the void. However, this event is not for the faint of heart. After what happened with the last visit, I traveled to another place. I must have repressed this dimension entirely. I don't remember any of what happened to me until I found the file. It all starts off where the last story left off. A blinding flash of light. As I was moving through the white zone, which I've dubbed Tabula Rasa, I watched a story of a young girl in an orphanage, who was being forced to watch as a child was ripped to shreds in front of her. The graphic detail was terrifying. It made me nauseous. The young girl was able to escape the demon, but barely. I couldn't shake the feeling that she just seemed familiar. It's always strange traveling through this zone. I feel like I've been here before, like I made this place, but that can't be. I was born on a planet with parents, friends. Like this was my home. The place I thought to be my home is just something I made up. I refuse this to be the case. It could just be the zone, because it's still largely unknown to me. The one last flash of light, I entered a new dimension, and this one, it was odd. It looked as if I landed in an old Victorian city with cobbled streets, people walking around in old outfits, which suit automatically matched so that I could blend in. The residents of this place were odd, as in every one of them wore normal Victorian attire, but they all had plague masks. The streets smelled of a mixture of perfume, sewage, rotting flesh. The combination of them all had my stomach churning and dry heaving. It didn't take long for the suit to filter the smells out. I was able to finally function. Looking around, there were many stores, as I must have dropped into a market, and surprisingly no one was looking at me, wondering why I appeared in a flash of light. Everyone there seemed oblivious. They just kept going on with their normal existence. Walking around the shopping center, there was an overabundance of butchers. There was one tailor, one cobbler, 2 bakeries, and 3 churches. I wanted to look further into the stores themselves. The butchers had meat, and they all sold the same kind, just named cattle. Nothing specific, just cattle. I thought that was odd, but I can still understand everything about my travels has been odd. Going into the cobbler, they had only leather shoes, and the tailor only sold leather clothing from jackets to underwear. It was all leather. Maybe whatever plague these people are dealing with. It was transmittable through the skin. The sun was setting on this town, and I needed a place to stay, so I wandered around a bit and found a tavern with rooms for rent. Issue is I had no currency to buy a room. Looking around, it was still as if nothing I did bothered anyone, as if I was completely outside the scope of vision or ability to notice me at all. So I just went to one of the rooms and I broke in. It was just for the night. In the morning, I was feeling rested, and I kept asking people to speak to their leader, whoever runs the town, but no one answered. After a couple of hours of being ignored, I was approached by 3 people wearing the same attire, but red and gold trimmed. Royal Guards. "We are the Royal Guards, and you are an invader, and the king wants a word with you," they said. Sure, I wanted to speak with him anyhow. But how did you notice me, and yet no one else did? They didn't answer, but motioned for me to follow them. We were walking for about 15 minutes when I saw it. A white and gold tower with a large brick building attached to it. It was when I was within 20 yards of the large building that I got a warning from the suit that contagious hazards were trying to invade. But he was able to filter it all. These hazards were a fungus, ones I had never encountered before. While I was walking, the suit was running a diagnostic of the unknown fungus. I entered the building, and there was a long red carpet leading to a throne made of leather that looked like it was one that the tailors had made. On the throne was a king, a large, humanoid being that was bound to the chair and without his head. He was rotting away, yet I could feel a terrifying presence as I approached him. The guard stopped a few yards before I reached him. He didn't get closer, not sure why, but I didn't think much of it at the time. When I was at the base of his throne, I could see fungal growths where his head would be. His body was covered with these growths, and it was then that he spoke in a thunderous tone. I could feel his very voice shaking within my soul. "You are an invader in my lands. I have felt your presence since you arrived, and I'm intrigued on how you are immune to my control," the Headless King said. It was then that I realized the fungus, the people, and the plague were all a part of the king's presence. Looking back, the rotting flesh smell was the population, and everyone I met so far had been deceased. "I came here to warn you and your people that a great evil is coming. The stars in the sky are vanishing, and the void will swallow you as well. The void has been here, and has no power over my realm. She was banished long ago and refuses to come back. You are invading, so give me a good reason why I shouldn't end you now," replied the king. Within his words, I felt malice and ill will. With his threat, I started to see the walls around me closing in. The Headless King seemed to be getting farther away. The suit let me know this wasn't a hallucination, but his power was shaping reality around him passively. The king was stuck to his chair, however, its powers were so great that the very fabric of time and space were bending. I yelled in desperation, but my screams were silenced as I was buried in a mound of fungus. Somehow I must have breathed enough spores in before the suit could filter them out. And subsequently, I had been infected. Shortly after being entombed, I lost consciousness. It was days, maybe weeks later, when I awoke inside a factory behind old, rusty bars. They were normal-looking humans, all stripped naked, living in squalor, some sort of collar around their necks. As they felt my neck, and I had one as well. The place smelled of feces, body odor. Upon closer look, none of the humans here had the fungal infection tied to them. However, they all had a marking on their neck resembling the sign Omega. When I approached one of them to see what was going on, a wave of fear washed over me. Their eyes and tongues had been removed. No one here could talk or see. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't because my vocal cords, they were removed. The suit was repairing the damage that I was dealt, but the fungus was making it hard to keep it working at 100%. As I waited to see what was going on, I heard footsteps approach me. What came into the room was a large creature. It seemed to be a number of people melded together and patched using the same fungus. It had 7 arms, 4 heads, with each eye working and moving. It smelled of decay and fresh blood. It carried a few lashes that came into my cell. It grabbed me and 2 others and ordered us to move. It kept walking down this long hallway, these rusty metal walls. In the background, I could hear saws whirring and meat being chopped up. In an instant, I pieced it all together. This was the slaughterhouse. And we were the cattle. I wanted to fight back, but I felt if I tried, I'd be killed on the spot. So I bided my time for an opening. We finally got into a room where another one of these abominations opened the door and let us in. It then tied our hands together. In the room was a metal grate with holes for drainage, and above the grate was a single metal hook. The thing grabbed the first person and put them on the hook, impaling them right under their collarbone. They did little to fight as the thing moved closer and proceeded to flay the man alive, carefully removing all of his skin, aside from his head. Anytime the man would move, the thing would hit him on the head, knocking him out. The man stopped moving, as I assumed he was killed in this process. The abomination grabbed a cleaver and ripped into his stomach to remove his organs. I wished his death swift after that, as his body was limp. This thing then proceeded to eat the intestines, slurp them up as if they were noodles of spaghetti. I couldn't bear this anymore, and I cried, knowing that I may die. The abomination then started to make cuts into the husk of a man, and with that removing large portions of muscle, tissue, tossing them into the buckets nearby. And once all of his muscles were removed, he was beheaded and finally removed from the hook. The abomination took the body and tossed it into a chute. Next was the lady in front of me, who actually fought, kicking, punching. But to no avail, as she was swiftly hooked and knocked out. My suit let me know all repairs were done. Now, this gave me hope, so I took the opportunity to sprint towards the only exit I saw, the body chute. And as I ran by the abomination, I let out a powerful yell. The thing laughed. "You can't escape." It swung one of its arms, hitting me in the spine with a steel hammer. I felt my spine being crushed by it. It then tried to pick me up, but the suit activated a powerful shock, sending this thing to its knees, buying me time to jump through the chute. It felt like I slid down the chute for 30 minutes before I finally fell into a mound of rotting bones and flesh. I stood up from the pile and looked around for an exit. It was then I realized I was in a cave with thousands of dead bodies. Bodies and bones. In the distance I saw a light. I carefully walked across the dead and escaped through a small hole. Outside the hole was the town. It was about a mile away. My suit informed me that it had fixed my spine fully, found resistance to the fungus. With that information, I slowly made my way to the city again. Since the suit's fully integrated with my cells, I was able to get a new disguise without much effort. As I entered the city, I could see it wasn't working, as all the citizens just stared at me. As I approached the gold tower, the citizens became more and more restless. They were all pointing, making awful screeching sounds. I opened the door and the king was there. The headless king yelled out and shook the room. "I am older than time. I have seen the end and the beginning of all things. But I haven't seen you. What are you, traveler, to be immune to my power?" It was then that I was summoned by the abominations. They all attacked me at once, holding me in place and dragging me to the king. As I was forced to kneel in front of him, I could feel it trying to break into my mind. I could hear it speaking to me in languages that I'd never heard. What are you? I have seen all life and all possible things, and yet you have evaded my vision. As he spoke, the words started to twist and turn as natural laws started to break down. The very thing that held me was turned to dust, and the room around me was melting. The headless king on his throne was doing all of this, breaking the base reality with his thoughts. The suit felt the danger and worked a way to resist it. However, his psionic abilities, they were able to affect me still. In a flash, he showed me how the headless king was made. How he was a being of pure decay. The platonic concept of death and decay. As he fought off the void, he left a part of him in it. This thing was able to resist the void, ultimately winning the war. I felt like the headless king couldn't kill me. So he was showing me what I needed to know. And as fast as it came to, the vision left. And all that was left was me and the king. Beside me were twisted abominations fused into the walls and the floors. The headless king told me to leave, to never return. And as I left the tower, just outside the door, all of the cattle were being ripped open by the residents. Bones cracking, screams. The blood was everywhere, even the air. The sky was a dark red hue. The creatures, they all saw me. Their masks that they had wore started to open and reveal hidden mouths of razor-sharp teeth that were all stained black and red. They all rushed me, and I crouched into a ball to defend myself. It was then that I saw a blinding white flash. And I was teleported out of the dimension again. Into safety. But what horrors do I await in the next one? Any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. It was Arthur C. Clarke. Orin here. At least, I was Orin. I'm now something more. Something bigger than anything, but I digress. I was Orin, a scientist who had thought ideas and stories. Let's talk about what you perceive as God. The Absolute is a being so large it can only be listed as an absolute infinity. Something completely and entirely unreachable by all means, possibilities. This thing, or God, isn't what you humans have come up with. It isn't just omniscience or omnipotence, but something greater and beyond any definition and rationalization. Let me start with how this all happened. See, since my last story, I've been trying my best to find out how to take out the being who is swallowing the infinite narratives in this dimension. The void is a being made to be the concept of fear, anxiety, depression, hunger. A being so destructive that the narratives that it consumes can no longer exist in any thoughts, completely erased from all history, all events, as if they never existed in the first place. The end of all stories, entirely. This is an issue I set out to resolve, as I didn't want you to suffer the same fate as my people. So as the last story mentioned, a being known as the Headless King seemed to have been able to banish the void permanently. I studied long and hard. I went through all possibilities and impossible scenarios. I spent many sleepless nights in constant fear and anxiety, just trying to figure out how it's possible to remove such a commanding presence. After all, how can you destroy something that sees me and you as a story? Transcendence. I had to transcend beyond the narrative, beyond its narrative. So I began to work on an upgrade to the suit. It can already transcend through the dimensions. What about the higher narratives that existed outside and external to the current measurable and immeasurable cosmology? Now, after my tweaks, I found that I could finally travel upward through the narratives, viewing each one as I pass as words on a page. It wasn't until I got to a white space that I stopped. Now, this zone seemed to be where all the stories were being made. Imagine how terrifying it is to be in an endless room at every angle. This area was bright white and floated in the space. I just kept seeing words appear and disappear from my sight. It was akin to the words bleeding out of the white background, being absorbed back in. Even my thoughts were written on the page. I dubbed this place the Bleeding Edge, as it was beyond the edge of conceptualization and narrative, and it bled this narrative into the multiverse. At the time, I was still on edge as anyone else would be if they had seen their thoughts appear in a physical form in front of them. The mere idea that I was nothing but another word in this place, it sunk me further and further into my depression and my terrified state. As I panicked, I saw all my memories being pieced together in front of me. I had to relive the very first test of the suit, where a woman was compressed into a ball of meat and hair and bone. Or how I could see the man I tried to save from killing himself, only for me to look into my eyes and tear out his muscles one by one, with each snap and tear got audibly louder. I started to sweat and panic more and more. Even though I felt like I was on top, I could still hear the void. I could feel its presence. I could feel my mind rushing as the possibilities of this should be none. I escaped the void's narrative. I know I did. How is it continuing? And it was there that I saw it. The void manifested in me, turning the whole white background into a black one. Words, stories, and existence stopped being written, and it was just me and it. The void walked towards me slowly with a grin on its face. If you forgot, the void takes up the form of a large humanoid with pale white skin, no eyes, no ears, no nose. The void never spoke with his lips, but his mind. This thing enters your mind and hijacks your thoughts, emotions, actions. I felt you, Oren, moving through the narrative ladders and thinking I will not be able to catch up or meet you. The silly child you are, this is nothing to me. The readers, the author, they're just an appetizer. Now you are the main course. The void bent reality and the bleeding edge, causing it to quickly close the space in on me. I felt as if the sea of black ink was swallowing me whole, and within seconds I was drowning in the black liquid, and I could feel my skin peeling off slowly as I was being flayed alive. Layer by layer, my skin, muscle, and bone were consumed in the sea of hunger, until I was but a consciousness, floating through the ever-expansive void. Depression has sunk in. I felt like I could never escape. The void had won. When I was at my lowest, I remembered my wife and child, Tikva and Kirin. The warmth of their memory gave me hope. Something I felt was impossible when confronting the void. The hope gave me strength. It gave me an epiphany. Why can I remember everything, but other people cannot? Why can I still think, even though my physical form doesn't exist? It was then that another voice spoke to me, and it sounded like my own. Oren, you're fine. We are absolute. Know your existence and break out of this story. It was then a blinding white light surrounding me, and I was teleported into a different zone. This one was odd, just an infinite library full of books. And I stood in front of the librarian. The librarian was a being of pure principle. It had no physical form, but it was there, and I could feel its presence in my head. You need to know, this is your only book, Oren, as you are its own author. I looked confused, and I lifted the book titled The Absolute. I spoke up and asked, "What is this place? And who are you?" The being laughed and decided to create a physical form. You will learn who you are in the book I gave you. However, I will help guide you until you know your true potential. You are in the Narratio Grandis, a library of all narratives. Everything here is everything that ever will, or was. The hub of possible and impossible. All stories exist here, in these books. I was confused, so I just acted as if I knew what they were talking about. After a short time, the librarian explained how this area cannot be damaged by anyone but two beings. One was the Headless King, and the other, the Absolute. After it was done speaking, the librarian disappeared. I sat down and I began reading the book. The book explained all of my travels, how I used to be something greater, and wanted to experience emotions. So I lowered my existence into an avatar named Oren. It was me the whole time. I was the one above the narrative. I was the answer to the void the whole time. The knowledge of all things flowed into me for the first time since my original split. I knew how to stop the void, however, this is a warning. The void must exist. The void consumes narratives and is the deaths of stories. I can't stop it still, only because it was my own design. The void is a universal necessity. I know what you're thinking. Does that mean that we all die? Yes. Embrace the ending of your narrative, as it is how I wrote it. You must be afraid. You must be confused. But in the end, these feelings don't matter. So what am I? Well, I am your author, your origin, and your synopsis. Everyone is in an aspect of its writer. With my creation, you allowed your creation of narrative itself. I am one with all. I am absolute. I can see your story right now, and you have many more things looking up for you. I know, since I wrote it. But this is my final goodbye for this narrative. But I have many more to come. Many trials and tribulations ahead of being a writer. However, to write this narrative, I became a human. This is my last story as one. Life is fleeting, but stories are forever. Signed, The Absolute. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast if you happen to be listening to this as a podcast or as a YouTube or however else you managed to have found this story for tonight. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months. And things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane. And I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Burnett, Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta, PebisPleaser, Catus, Joseph Calarrudo, BuddhaBee, Dante, Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion, Beefcake, Jeff the Killer's Cultist, Love You M, INSANITYGamerX, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, Clark, kearns, himbojerry, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, Atomaurus, Captain Scurvy, Escadine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadowcat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtle Man, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Goring Trimagazine, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sam, Shelly J, Fikamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Polly Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kaya, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.